Okay, I had a quick question about whether this would, the applique process I did in my previous video on the new version 9 applique with holes, how that worked with blanket stitch. And basically nothing's changed. The problem with blanket stitch is going around acute angles, and the software tries really hard to do it evenly, but if there's an acute angle, it's very complicated. And on this particular letter A too, there's a slight little kink here at the bottom of this leg here, and there may even be a slight one there too, and that also complicates the process. But it isn't that hard to adjust the blanket stitch to make it look a little bit better. It's just a matter of tweaking the nodes in the reshape tool. So I'll give you a quick demonstration of that, so that if you want to do a blanket stitch applique, you can get the best look possible. Now this is a very narrow leg down here, so the blanket stitch at the moment, oops, that's from the previous video. Let's try and zoom into the right place. There we go. At the moment, if I turn off True View, you can see that the satin stitch straddles the fabric. The fabric comes down through the center of the satin stitch. That can be adjusted, but in this case we wouldn't want to, because we wouldn't want to get any closer into the, we'd lose the fabric showing through here. So you've got to be careful about which fonts you use for all of these things. This was just an example because I didn't have many fonts to choose from in the software trial version. But if we turn this into blanket stitch, the straight edge of the blanket stitch will be hard up against the fabric, and the teeth will come out into the fabric this way, and the same on the other side. So if the teeth are too long, you will have crossing over as well. So we need to adjust the settings of the size of the blanket stitch as well. So let's just zoom out a little bit, and I'll try and center that without, whoops, jumping all over the place on you. All right, and go back to True View, and I'm going to right click on the letter A and change the object properties to applique. So, sorry, not to applique, change the cover stitch to a blanket stitch. So on the applique tab in the object properties, down at the bottom left here, we've got the cover stitch, and we want a cover stitch, but we can just change it to a blanket stitch here by left clicking. Now if that's just the default settings here of a spacing 4mm and a width of 3mm. If I apply that, that's not what happened last time. Okay, oh yes it is. But if I apply that, sorry, got a little bit confused there because I also forgot to change the tack down to a running stitch. So the running stitch at the moment is what was the default for satin stitch. So you need to also come up here to your tack down and change that box zigzag to a single run and apply that. That looks better. Now one good thing is that in some ways this seems to have improved, because the blanket stitch around the hole is facing into the center, and the blanket stitch around the outside is facing into the fabric as well. So that is an improvement, because in past we had to actually turn it around and do all sorts of funny things. So that looks good. But as you can see, if I zoom in here, well, we can see some major problems here already with the teeth on this narrow leg, but we'll look at that in a minute. But if we go in here, we can see the teeth are crossing over. So this blanket stitch is far too big for this font. So we need to adjust that now. So let's go to our width, which is how wide each of these teeth are. And I'm going to change that back to 2mm from 3. And because I've changed that, I think I need to also change the spacing down to 3 so that it balances. But these settings are quite arbitrary. It's up to you what you have there. And it would be helpful if I used the right keyboard. I've got 2 computers here at the moment. Okay, so I'll just change the width to 2, and I'll change the spacing to 3 and apply that. Okay, so they almost meet. So you could probably go down a little bit narrower, but I probably would be happy with that. Now, that has also already improved the corners. So that's where you need to start first. A realistic size for the size of your font. In fact, that's made a huge difference to the corners. So the one place where you have got a really long stitch is here, and maybe this one's a bit long as well. So when I have that happen, I'll just go okay to get out of there. I use the reshape tool and I add a couple of nodes in here, just or sometimes only one node is necessary, and tweak them around a bit till I get a better looking stitch, so that I haven't got such an acute angle. So instead of coming down into a point and then shooting off this way, I'll come down and I'll go across the point a little bit, and then that way. We're zoomed in at 877% at the moment, so it's going to be not noticeable in the actual final stitch out, but of course we always test sew to make sure we are happy with the result. But so let's select, well, it is selected, so let's go to the reshape tool, and I can see I've got one node right here. If I zoom in even further, I've got a single node right here. So if I left click just above it, I'll get another node, and you'll see that affected it slightly. And now I'm just going to grab this bottom node and pull it back this way a little bit, and you can see it added another tooth in there, another, well, I call them teeth. This one's still a bit long, so let's try and go a little bit further along. Oh, it's added two in there now. That looks ugly. Let's come back, and let's just bring this one down a fraction. No, I've got another one in there now too. I think that's about as good as you'll get it. But as I said, we are zoomed in to well, now 702%. Let's go out. You can see it is fractionally longer than the others, but it is on the corner, so it does look better than that longer one though. Now same on this corner here. I can add a node in here and just move this one across, and that's put in two smaller teeth. If I zoom in, you see I've got just a little squared off corner here, which helps the software work out where to put the teeth. So you'll do the same on this side. It doesn't matter which side of this long tooth you put it. You can experiment, but the idea is to square off that corner a little bit. That's come out really nicely. I'll do the same here, and that doesn't look too bad at all. Oh, now I've got two teeth here, so I overdid it. I'll just go back. I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it. But that's a big improvement. So obviously get the right size blanket stitch for the shape you're doing. If it's a small shape with very sharp corners, you want a small blanket stitch. Obviously you still need enough bite into the fabric, so you want a fabric that doesn't fray very much. Or you want to use one of the adhesive backings so that you can actually glue it to the base fabric so that you can avoid fraying. Or this would work well with other fabrics that don't fray, like felt and so forth. Now there is another way you can adjust those teeth if you're absolutely desperate, and that's using the stitch edit function, but I'll do that in another video. In most cases this will work. So I hope that's helped, and you can do this same adjustment in any version 7, 8 or 9. It works in all of those versions. Thanks very much.